People who say not to judge a book by a cover have never self-published a book. Hey guys, welcome to Goodbye Self-Help, real advice for real people. Today I'm telling you exactly how I made almost $3,000 by self-publishing my very first book on Amazon. Okay, so the first thing you need to know about my self-published book is that I have no experience with self-publishing before this. I had never done it. I had never thought about it. This was a very organic process for me, so I came up with the idea and then had to decide how to put the idea out there. So if you haven't self-published before, if you're not into the self-publishing world, that is exactly where I was. So you don't need any kind of prior knowledge in order to self-publish a book and be successful at it. So in this video, I'm talking you through how I sold the self-published book. I'm not going to talk about so much the actual writing process, but I am going to talk about how to come up with the idea, how to put it online, and how to actually find people who are willing to buy it besides your mom. At the end of the video, I'm going to talk about exactly what I regret in this whole process and what I would do differently if I were to do it all over again. So stay tuned to the end, and we're going to go through the whole process together so you can start making money from your self-published books and not having them completely get lost in the Amazon wilderness. So my idea for a self-published book was related to my blog. So I have a blog about life in the UK as an American expat because I'm an American and I live in England, and this is something that I talked about a lot in my blog, in my Facebook group, and I really wanted some sort of resource in terms of an actual book that somebody could get their friend if they were planning to move to London as an American or move anywhere in the UK as an American. And so this was a really organic idea. We'll talk about how to come up with ideas if you're somebody who knows that you want to self-publish a book, but you don't know what you want to talk about. But for me, it was a really natural, organic process. So I had this idea. I sat down in one summer and I wrote this entire book of 80,000 words, I think it was. So a full-length book. And then I panicked because I had no idea how to get it into people's hands. I had no experience in self-publishing. I had no experience in publishing. I just published blog posts on my blog, and that was kind of the extent of my publishing knowledge. So I basically panicked and had no idea what to do. So again, for me, I have made in almost 1 year, 11 months, over $2,600. I've sold 389 copies and I sell a few each day, which I'll talk about later. And for me, this is a success. So because I have set up a situation where my book is going to continue selling, I know that that number is going to continue to rise, the sales, the amount of books sold, and at the end of the day, for a project that, again, started kind of completely randomly and I didn't know what would happen with it, in the span of 1 year, making almost $3,000 is definitely a success to me. So let's clarify a few things about my self-published book. It was nonfiction, so it was not a fiction story, and it wasn't a memoir. So some people do write memoirs and self-publish them, but for me, it was a real nonfiction informational book. It did have anecdotes about my life, and I wove myself into a lot of it, but it also acted as sort of a guide for people who were planning on moving to the UK. It's also a book that I sell exclusively on Amazon. So I haven't signed up to any of the other self-publishing platforms. I don't sell the book like from my garage. This is just an Amazon self-published book. It is available in Kindle and in a hardback, which I'll talk about more in a minute, but just so that you know exactly where I'm starting from, it is a nonfiction, informational book with anecdotes, and it is sold exclusively on Amazon. So let's talk about how to replicate this kind of success and what I did along the way. The first thing I want to talk about is how to pick a topic for your self-published book. So again, for me, this was an idea that turned into a book, but let's say you're going the opposite direction and you want to decide on a topic knowing that you're already going to self-publish a book. So what works well in self-publishing Typically, nonfiction books are going to do a lot better in a self-published world than fiction. There's something about fiction that we are kind of accustomed to trusting big name publishers with. This isn't to say that people haven't found success in fiction self-publishing. However, if you're looking to make as much money as possible off the bat, you're really going to need to hone in on what I'll talk about in a second about solving problems, as well as finding some sort of nonfiction book to sell. Okay, so you're like, yes, I can write nonfiction. I can do that. I can write about crocheting. I can write about cooking. I can write about going to outer space. I can write about baking. I can write about gardening. I can write about whatever the nonfiction topic is that you have in mind, or maybe you have a few of them. Write those down. And now for each topic or each idea, you want to think about what problem you're solving in somebody's life who is buying your book. So for me, I was solving the problem of this person's anxieties or fears or questions about their move to the UK. So they were desperate for this information. They obviously had not moved to the UK before, and I was really trying to solve the problem of making them feel a lot more comfortable in their move and what to expect and what was going to happen. You have to have some sort of problem that you're solving for somebody, just like if you were to write a blog post, in order to get them to read. Again, this is especially important if you're a beginning self-published author. So, no one's ever heard of you. No one is really interested in your memoir unless it's something to do with, escaping from a cult, or maybe you are an actual astronaut, and in that case people would have heard of you, but you know what I'm getting at. So your story isn't that interesting if people don't already know you. So start by solving somebody's problem. Make it about the person that is reading the book, not about yourself. You can use yourself and use your experiences to help that person, but at the end of the day, it's about what that person needs, not about your desire to get this information or to get your story out there. For me, it also worked really well to niche down without niching down too far. So my book is for Americans who are moving to the UK. There are not millions of them. There are definitely thousands of them. But I kept it specific enough that I could speak very honestly and openly about their experience in the UK. I didn't open it up and say like an expat's guide to moving to the UK from anywhere in the world, because if you're from China, your experiences in moving to the UK are going to be a lot different than if you're American. If you're Canadian, you might have different customs than Americans that are going to look different in the UK. So you don't want to be so broad that your audience is everybody or is too large, but you want to be broad enough that you actually do have readers. So I probably wouldn't write a self-published book called a New Yorker's Guide to Living in Oxford. There are probably people from New York who do live in Oxford, but they're not going to be enough to really make me that much money on my book. And that is too niche down. So you want to find this really fine line between too big and too small. And once you know it, it will make sense to you. Run it by a few friends, come up with kind of the levels of niching that you can do and how far you can go. And you'll kind of get a gut check for what you feel is too broad for you to be able to write authoritatively about, and what is too specific that the audience is like one person who might buy your book but isn't going to sustain any kind of future lifestyle. So you found your topic, and now you actually have to write the book, which is the part that takes a long time. Took me about 2 to 3 months, really working hard on it while also having a full-time job, but you can do this in as fast or as slow as works for you. You just need to get the book written. And I wrote the book in Word instead of worrying about the formatting in the beginning. Again, this video isn't about how I wrote the book, it's about how I made money from the book, but just so you know, you gotta spend the time, the kind of long slog of writing a book before we can get to the fun part of making money from it. Now let's talk about the audience that you've selected for your book and how you're going to get them on board to actually buy your book. So it's not enough that Americans moving to the UK exist in the world, I need to find out how to get Americans in the UK on my side to buy my book when it comes out. And this is one of the major mistakes that people make when self-publishing, and one of the reasons why a lot of people fail in self-publishing and don't make any money. It's because you didn't get your audience on side before the book was released, before you have it ready to sell. You have to build up that audience and those people who are interested in what you have to say before you release the book to the world. Now, this is because it takes a while for people to feel comfortable buying something from somebody. It takes a while. You have to see things a certain number of times before you really feel connected to a person or connected to their story. And for me, what I did was I already had a blog before I decided to write the book, but I also started a Facebook group. Facebook groups are life-changing and amazing, but we'll talk more about that in a different video. All you need to know is I use my blog to funnel people into a Facebook group. And in that Facebook group, I attracted people who were both interested in visiting and in moving to the UK. Now, for me, that created a wide net. So my book didn't actually appeal to every single person in the Facebook group because some were just interested in traveling to the UK while some were interested in moving, but it was still a general way to build an audience for myself that was mine. So I owned that Facebook group. I was the admin for it, and nobody else could delete my posts or tell me what to write. Another way that you can start to build your audience, again, social media is really good. You could do something like starting a YouTube channel, or you can start being active in other people's groups. Now, here's the thing about using other people's platforms in order to sell your book. So this is particularly popular in Facebook groups. So there are a lot of Facebook groups about expats in the UK, anything from women in the UK to expats in London, all kinds of things. But those groups were owned by other people. However, I could still start to participate in them, which was going to give me an idea of what kind of questions I needed to answer, what questions were people talking about in these groups that I could write in my book. It also made me kind of a known person in these groups. So when it came time to sell my book and to promote it, the people who owned the group were a little bit more accepting of me putting this out there because I had kind of established myself as somebody who wasn't crazy and was a person with good information. You don't want to just start spamming groups and start spamming the internet with your self-published book after the book is done. You have to put in the work before the book is done, and it does take time. Again, this isn't about shortcuts. It's about what is actually going to work, and what is going to work is building your audience in whatever platform in whatever way you can before your book is sold. Find out where your audience is and go find them. Find out where they like to hang out on the internet and go there. If you're writing a book about technology or some very specific kind of like computer manual, they might not hang out in Facebook groups. They might hang out on Reddit, or if it's something to do about parenting, they might hang out on Facebook, but they might also have their own forums, and they might also have their other parts of the internet that are specifically for parents that they hang out on. So I know that it feels daunting and it does take time, but honestly, it's going to take you time to write your book anyway. So as long as you start building an audience when you're starting to write your book, you're going to at least have some people that you're ready to sell to. One more way of building your audience and getting people that are going to be interested in your book is building an email list. So an email list is basically getting somebody to give you their email address so that you can email them things that they're interested in. For me, I emailed people like top tips and tricks about London, or like a free ebook or something like that, so that they had some sort of value in being on my list. The thing about a list is that you own it. So if Facebook shut down tomorrow, if YouTube shut down tomorrow, let's hope not, if Instagram, wherever you are, if that all shuts down, you still have those people's emails and you can still start a new platform elsewhere. You can still move your group elsewhere, but you have direct contact to them. You can literally be in their inbox. So Every other platform requires the person to go on the platform and then to hopefully go into your Facebook group or go into your YouTube channel or somehow decide to go to you. With an email list, you can go directly to them, and that is the beauty of an email list. But don't be too stressed if you don't have a large one. When I self-published my book, I think I had about 400 emails on my email list and maybe 2,000 people in my Facebook group. But again, not all of those people were interested in my book. And not all of the people on the list were interested in my book either, because some were just visitors to the UK. So don't be overwhelmed thinking that you need like 1 million email addresses, but start gathering what you can, because every single bit helps. So you've written your book, you've taken the time, you stayed up late, you got up early, you wrote 50,000, 60,000, 70,000, however many words, and you are completely done and never want to see it again. But that is where the work really begins, in selling the book, not just being able to say that you've written one. So I, again, did mine in Microsoft Word. I didn't do the formatting ahead of time because for me, it would slow down my process in actually getting the book written. I decided to format it afterwards, which some people might find tedious because you do have to go back and change a bunch of settings. But for me, it was just much easier to write in Word and then to do the work at the end of formatting. So formatting for Amazon KDP, the self-publishing platform, is very specific. There are very laid out guidelines that you have to follow. However, if you don't want to do this yourself, you can hire somebody on Fiverr to do it for you pretty inexpensively, who is used to the exact stipulations that you need to follow. So you don't need to spend a ton of time on the formatting. You just need to make sure the formatting gets done. I will put the link to Amazon KDP formatting down below. Again, I'm not going to go through in this video specifically how to format, but just know that I had never self-published, I had never formatted. I'm not very good at Word or Excel or any of those kinds of formatting things because I'm too lazy, and I was still able to do it myself, so you can too. After your book is formatted, you need to focus on maybe the second most important thing in terms of selling your book. Again, the first is going to be having that audience and someone to sell it to, but the second, and a very, very close second, is having an amazing looking book cover. People who say not to judge a book by a cover have never self-published a book, because that is exactly what you do, is you judge everything you see on Amazon by its cover. You judge the tone, you judge whether you think it's going to be any good, you judge literally if you're going to click, if you're going to buy, if it's worth your time, if you're going to relate to it, if it's something that you'd be interested in. Like, every single judgment that you can possibly make, you do by looking at the book cover. So your book cover needs to be amazing. Now, I am not good at graphic design. I am good at writing, and that's kind of where my skills stop. So for me, I knew I needed to hire this out. You can hire it out to a professional designer by doing something like a 99 Designs competition, which again, I'll link below as a resource. You can put it on Fiverr. You're not necessarily always going to get the best designs on Fiverr, but if you don't have much money, you can get some really good looking ones on there. Or somebody that you know might be really good at designing that you can work with in person. Luckily, my husband is a really good designer, and so I was able to get him to do a book design for me that really set the tone for exactly what the book was, how it was supposed to feel, because you also want the cover to say something about your book. So it needs to be kind of visually appealing. That's number one. But number two is it needs to talk about the tone without talking about it, because it's a cover, so it can't say anything. But for me, I wanted it to be a fun but informative cover. So I wanted somebody to know that they would learn something while also not feeling like they were reading a textbook. So that's what he designed. Something that was a little bit whimsical, didn't take itself super seriously, but was serious enough that you knew that this was important information that you needed to know. If you're doing a book of jokes, the cover is going to look a lot different than if you're doing a manual to how to change the transmission in a car. Just make sure that your cover really reflects to you in your gut what your book is about and gives you this feeling that you want people to feel when they look at your book. And that's going to go a long way in terms of making somebody actually click once they are in your audience. And now that you have this audience who maybe you're posting, sharing blog posts with, or sharing YouTube videos with, or just posting kind of your book writing process on Instagram or whatever it is, you want to start using your audience and getting them involved in the book process. So you've already onboarded them as somebody who might be interested in what your book is going to be about, but how are you going to entice them to actually buy the book once it's out? One of the things that I did was I had a couple different book covers designed, and then I made a poll in a Facebook group and said, hey guys, do you prefer this cover or do you prefer this cover? This was helpful because I genuinely got audience feedback and needed feedback to determine which cover was going to be the best. But also it gave people this tiny bit of stake in what I was doing, piqued their interest, and made them feel in some way like they were connected to the publishing of the book and thus more excited about it. So you could poll them on anything, but the cover is a really good way of kind of checking in with your audience, making it known that your book isn't too far off and making them feel more involved. So before we actually sell the book, we need to think about the price to sell it at that's going to make you enough money to make it worth it and to make it something that people will actually pay for. Now, a major mistake that I made when I was self-publishing my book is I listened to other people who weren't in my audience about their opinions on what my price should be, which in hindsight was pretty stupid, but at the time I didn't know who else to ask besides like friends and family. But friends and family weren't interested in my book besides the fact that I had written it, so they had no gauge for how much the book should cost. And in the end, they told me that my price of $14.99 was probably too expensive. And it turns out it's not too expensive for my audience, the people who actually need and want the book. I've never had a comment about somebody not purchasing it because of the price, and I've never had somebody give a review or say that it should be worth less money than it was. So when you come to the price, don't be afraid to price it to sell to your audience. You have written this book to solve their problem. How much money will they pay? Well, that's up to your audience. It's not really up to your mom. So we love her, but don't ask her. Now, the day has finally arrived. You have written the book. You have come up with the cover. You have set the price. You have formatted it. You have done all of the things, and you are ready to get your book out into the world, and you really want to do it so that somebody buys it and you don't feel like a complete loser for writing a book that nobody buys. I was terrified when I wrote my book because I felt like I've spent all of this time, I've drummed up all of this interest, and what if when push comes to shove, nobody clicks, nobody buys besides like my grandma, which again, thanks grandma, but not really going to sustain me in the future. On the day of launch, you want to get that book everywhere that you can. You want to give the link to your grandma. You want to give the link to your mom to send to her friends. They're not your audience, but I'll get to that in a second. You want to email it to your list. You want to publish it in your group as this really excited post, do a video, do a YouTube video, wherever else you are, Instagram, do an Insta story, Twitter, go around the neighborhood, knocking on doors and giving them the link. Whatever you can do to get it out to as many people as possible at the same time on launch day, not exactly at the same specific time, but in the same day, is going to help show Amazon that your book is worthy of being recommended to other people and might lead to it going in like the trending lists and things like that. So when you actually do the launch, I really found it helpful to just like completely unleash this link and this exciting news in every single area of my life. I didn't drip feed it day by day. I wanted this like massive launch, get it out there, show Amazon, people are buying this book, people are interested, and that really helped me go up in the rankings on launch day, which helps sustain my book being recommended over time. On the first day of sales, I sold 39 copies. Again, some of these were to my grandma. No shame in that on the day of launch because you're trying to get Amazon to see all of these people buying your book. So day one was 39 and I published it like on August 31st. So it was literally like August is 39 copies, but it was on the first day. And then in September, I sold 73 copies in the month after. Now, since then, it's been about a year. I have never had a month where I've sold less than 13 copies. And in fact, my most popular month for my book wasn't even my launch month. It turned out to be in December when I sold 89 copies that year without doing any promotion whatsoever, which I'll talk about in a second. So you've gotten that initial boost from your first day of sales, your first couple days of sales. What do you do to sustain your book long term to be something that is continually sold, continually found on Amazon or found through your own personal platforms? The first thing that you need to do is you need to politely ask for reviews on your book from real people. And when I say real people, this is where I mean not your mom, because Amazon actually has a way sometimes of telling who your friends and family are on the platform. And they've even deleted some people's reviews that they say, well, this is actually from your grandma, so this review doesn't count as an authentic review. It doesn't happen all the time, but it's something to keep in mind. You need to make sure that you have built your audience so that real people who are really interested in that book and not just you are leaving reviews. So when people would get in contact with me and say, hey, just got your book, so excited to read it, I would always make sure to respond, thank them, and ask really nicely if they wouldn't mind leaving a review on Amazon. People in your audience who have bought your group are usually super happy to help. They're not all going to follow through on leaving a review, but you want as many authentic reviews as possible, obviously 5 stars. And that is going to help as future social proof to show other readers that actually other people have liked this book, even if they weren't in your initial audience with the initial promotion. Now, what next? Where do you go after you've launched your book, however many copies you've sold? Even if you haven't sold that many, how do you build the momentum? Like I said, I sold 89 copies in December, and that was my highest sales month without any active promotion. So you don't need to be panicked if in the beginning it's like a slower build, even if you do your best on launch day. Your book still has potential. You just need to figure out how you're going to get it into the hands of your audience. For me, this comes in the way of adding it into my autoresponder on my email list. So if somebody signs up to my email list, they automatically get an email from me welcoming them onto the list and telling them my resources that I have. So that's something that happens without me even interacting with anything now. It's an autoresponder and people still buy my book all the time through that. I also put it on my blog post, in every single blog post that has to do about moving to the UK. As an American, I put like a call out and say, if you want more information, check out the best book on moving to the UK as an American. Click here. They're taken to Amazon. They see the 5-star reviews and they purchase. And then a lot of times they email me to say, I'm so excited, I just bought your book. And then the circle continues where I ask for a review and on and on and on. I do still share my link occasionally in my Facebook group and in some other groups, but most of my sales now come from somebody searching on Amazon and finding my book, or it coming from my autoresponder, or them reading a blog post that I've updated and will always have the link to my book. I don't have to go in every day and try and sell my book. So again, if you want to be successful as a long-term self-publishing option, you need to figure out that ongoing element of how are you staying in contact with your audience. You can't just sell 3,000 copies to your grandma as much as she might want to buy your book. You really need to find out how to keep engaging with your audience. Now, the final thing that I promised I'd tell you is what I regret about self-publishing my book and what I wish I'd done differently. What I wish I'd done differently is putting my book on Kindle as soon as I had self-published it in the first place. So I didn't actually have the Kindle version until maybe a month later after people started asking me for it. The reason I didn't want to put it on was because I felt like having a Kindle version would somehow make it seem like less authoritative or less authentic, because it was like, well, anybody can publish an ebook, but I published a real book that you have to buy and hold in your hands. But Actually, some people still do have Kindles. Some people do prefer ebooks, or they were in a situation where they just weren't in a country where they could actually get my Amazon book delivered. They started requesting Kindle sales. So I missed out on those initial sales by not doing the Kindle formatting and just biting the bullet and uploading the Kindle version at the same time. And in hindsight, you should put both on to give your audience an option. I still have about 60% paperback sold and about 40% Kindle version. So if I didn't have that Kindle version uploaded, those people might have purchased the paperback book, but a lot of them actually wouldn't. A lot of them only purchased because there was the Kindle version available. So don't shoot yourself in the foot there. Just have both options is what's worked for me and what would work for most audiences. It does take a little bit more work because Kindle has different formatting than the paperback version. And at the time, I was just like, oh my God, I cannot do another thing on this book. I am done. But I missed out on some sales and some money. So that's my biggest regret and what I would encourage you not to do. If you need any more advice on self-publishing, leave a comment down below. Make sure to subscribe for future advice about self-publishing, blogging, life in general, and make sure to let me know that you enjoyed this video and what other topics about self-publishing you want to know about. Thanks for watching.